Shalom, everyone. One of the topics that repeated itself throughout Baba Kama is the question of robbing and stealing and the difference between robbery and theft. And we've discussed it in the past. And towards the end of the Gemara, there's another topic, a specific topic in the question of robbery. And it's the question of robbing, stealing from a goy. Let me share the sources and we'll start. So I start with the Gemara in Baba Kama, page 113. And there the Gemara says, the Gemara cites another statement related to stealing from a Gentile. And Rabbi Bar Gidel says that Rav Shimshon Chasida says, it is prohibited to rob a Gentile, but is permitted to retain his lost item. Meaning one is not required to return a lost to a Gentile. And the Gemara examines the basis for each of these ruling. And we are focusing, of course, in the robbing. It is prohibited to rob a Gentile, as Rav Huna says. From where is it derived that it is prohibited to rob a Gentiles? It is derived from a verse in Sefer Dvarim, as it is stated, and you shall consume all the people that the Lord your God shall deliver unto you. And that indicates that it is permitted to consume the other nation's property only when they are delivered into your hands, meaning in times of war, but not when they are not delivered into your hands. And if we look at Rabbeinu Bechaye, who explains that Pasuk Rabbeinu Bechaye Bar Asher from Spain, 13th, 14th century, and Rabbeinu Bechaye is saying on that specific Pasuk, which is the proof for Rav Huna that is not allowed to rob a Gentile, says Rabbeinu Bechaye, which the Lord your God is about to give to you. Our sages in Baba Kama state that this was true only at the time when the Canaanites were being delivered into the hands of the Israelites. In other words, during the war, during the years of conquest. But nowadays, in other words, Spain, end of 13th century, Christians, Muslim ruling, nowadays stealing from the or robbing Gentiles is certainly prohibited. In fact, the Talmud there describes stealing from a Gentile as a great sin, that stealing from Israelite, as it involves the desecration of the name of the Lord. In other words, Rabbeinu Bechaye is saying, robbing a Gentile is chilul Hashem. It's a desecration of the name of the Lord. The Jewish people are to be models of morality. If we steal, we drag God's Torah into disrepute. Okay, and then he tells us, see also my comment in Vayikra. So before we move to his words in Vayikra, we first need to see how Rabbeinu Bechaye is saying it's chilul Hashem. It's a desecration of the name of the Lord, and our but the way that we need to be, in exile, is to behave rightfully. It's to behave morally. Everyone's looking at us, and if they see that we, the people of Israel, are not moral, and we deceive the Gentiles, then they say, look at those people. Look of how they behave, and these people is the people of Israel. And he sends us to Vayikra. And when we go to Vayikra, to the Pasuk that he sends us in Leviticus 25:50, the Pasuk there starts with V'chishav im koneo. Okay, he will make a reckoning for the one who purchased him. We're talking about a slave, a Gentile slave, belonged to a Jew. Shnat Yovel, he has to release him. And the pasuk says, "V'chishav im koneu." Okay, you should reckoning, or if I use another word, you should calculate and give him what he deserves to give. Do not cheat your slave when you're sending him free and give him less than he deserves. And says Rabbeinu Bechayei, the verse warns that one must make a meticulous accounting and not try and trick the Gentile in one's calculation. The reason is, says Rabbeinu Bechayei, that stealing from pagans is prohibited as a form of desecrating the holy name. Again, he uses the word Chilul Hashem, desecrating the holy name of the Lord. And the Torah demands such careful accounting when the Gentile is questioned, when the Gentile in question is under Jewish authority. Okay? In other words, we could have said that because of the pasuk in Sefer Dvarim that says when you conquer them, then you can steal from them. The Gentile is under the ruling of a Jew, so maybe that's permitted to steal from him because he's under the Jewish authority. And the question is no. I might have thought that seeing the Torah permits charging interest in Gentiles, but something that the Torah does allow us is to charge interest, but something which the Torah elsewhere appears to view as a form of unethical conduct, that stealing, at least indirectly from a pagan, is permitted. But therefore, the Torah makes a point to tell us that this is not so. Okay, don't try to say that if the Torah allows me to take ribit, interest from the goy, then maybe it's allowed to steal a goy, a Gentile, or definitely a Gentile, which is my slave. And the Torah is saying no, it is not permitted. And we know, says Rabbeinu Bechayeh, already from Yosef's brothers, whose money had been returned to them by the Egyptians, that they took it back to Egypt. Yaakov is telling them, you should take that money back. In response to their father's Yaakov instruction. If Yaakov thought that even if the pagans had made an error, we must not take advantage of it to their detriment, how much more so must we not disadvantage them deliberately? In other words, says Rabbeinu Bechayei, look, Yaakov could have said, okay, they gave you back your money, or they put all kind of gifts in your bags, in a mistake. But he says, no, we should not take what doesn't belong to us and return it to the Egyptians. And says Rabbeinu Bechayeh, so do we. We must. And more than that, we must not disadvantage them deliberately. And all of this occurred before the Torah was given. There was no law of returning your a theft to the Gentile. Says Rabbeinu Bechayeh, was before the Torah was given, when we did not have these limitations imposed upon us. How much more meticulous must one deal with a Gentile now that the law of the Torah applies to us? So I think these are very, very clear wording of Rabbeinu Bechayeh, but he adds something else. And he adds and he says that Tosefta, to our page, the Tosefta from Baba Kama 113 states expressly that if one has robbed a pagan, one must return the stolen goods. It adds that such robbery is a graver crime than robbing a Jew, because the crime includes the sin of desecrating the Lord's name. Again, Chilul Hashem. When one robs a fellow Jew, the victim does not use this as an excuse to question the rules of the Torah and the fairness of God. And he continues to say, but when one steals from a Gentile, that everyone sees, if this is how if this is how the chosen people behave, then there's God is not so great and the Torah is not so great. And again, Chilul Hashem, we have to be careful and be even more careful not robbing or cheating a Gentile. And Ravi Moshe Mikutzi, known as Smag, Sefer Mitzvot Gadol, another, again, Spain, 13th century, Smag is adding something else very important. And he says, I've already taught to the exiles of Jerusalem, which is in Spain. Okay, he calls that the exile of Jews in Spain, the exiles of Jerusalem, because Jews came to Spain. Some say even in the after the destruction of the first temple, but definitely after the destruction of the second temple, Jews were spread around the world, and some got to Spain. And he's turning to the Jewish community as the exile of Jerusalem in Spain. Little does he know that in 200 years, Jews will be expelled also from Spain. But he's talking to the Jewish community, and he says, I talked to them in the rest of the Galuyot in Edom, Galut Edom in the wording of Chazal and other Chachamim in the Middle Ages is referring to Jews under the ruling of Christian countries. That's Edom. Because now that the exile has been prolonged, it is more than likely that Israel must distinguish itself from the vanities of the world and grasp the seal of God Almighty, who is truth, and not to lie to Israel or to the Gentiles, and not to mislead them in any matter, and to sanctify themselves even in what is permitted to them, as it is says, the remnant of Israel shall do not wrong and speak no falsehood. A deceitful tongue shall not be in their mouth, only such as these shall graze and lie down, with none to trouble them. And it's a quote from Tzefania. In other words, what does Rav Moshe of Kutzi saying? He's saying now that the exile is so long and we're still here among the nations, we must be careful not to follow the vanities of the surrounding, and we should take extra care to behave like the seal of God, which is truth. And the seal of truth means not to lie, not to steal, not to rob, not to mislead. And when we behave like this, we sanctify God's name, and when we don't, it's Chilul Hashem. And he quotes a pasuk from Tzefania that says that all who remain from Israel at the exile, if they keep their tongue, if they, I'll show you the pasuk in Hebrew. In Hebrew, maybe it'll be clearer. There it is, like the remaining of the people of Israel in exile, if they're not gonna do wrong and not gonna lie and not deceit other people, then they'll be fine in wherever they are. Ravzu ve'en macharid. Okay, God will leave them alone, and the Gentiles will leave them alone. In other words, it's our behavior that is what takes is we need to understand that our behaviors affected the way that the quiet that we have amongst the Gentiles. And continues Rabbi Moshe of Kutzi, and he says, and when the Almighty comes to save the Jews in the exiles, the Gentiles will say they are righteous and they are people of truth, and the Torah is true in their mouths. Okay, the Gentiles, says Rav Moshe of Kutzi, and how relevant it is to our days, are looking at Am Yisrael and checking every little thing they do and say. And if they say that really the people of Israel are truth, are abiding to the truth, and then so the Gentiles will also praise God and praise the Torah. But if the people of Israel behave deceitfully with the Gentiles, they will say, look at the Almighty's look what the Almighty has done, who chose thieves and cheats to be his people. And it also written, I will sow her in the land as my own. It's a pasuk from Hosea that God is saying, I will take the people of Israel and I will sow them in the land, and they'll be and then they'll grow and multiply. And says Rav Moshe Mikutzi, does one man sows one portion in the land, but to find a few? Of course, nobody is sowing just to have a little bit. The meaning of that pasuk, says Rav Moshe of Kutzi, is that God is putting us among the nations in order that other people will join us. It's one of the few places when we hear a sage, a chacham from the 13th century, a Rishon, who is or saying that conversion is something positive, that we want it to happen. So he says, God put us among the nations, not that will remain us, that people will join us, but this is how God saw Israel in the lands, so that they will be joined by converts. And as long as they behave deceitfully toward them, who will stick to them? Like, nobody will want to join the people of Israel if they look at the people of Israel and they see that their ways are cheating, lying, stealing, robbing. And all of this, I would like to conclude with a famous and beautiful words of Mesilat Yesharim. Okay, it's more than just the way that we behave among the Gentiles, and the forbidden to steal or rob a Gentile. Mesilat Yesharim, Rabbi Chaim Lutzato, in his famous book, is saying that, and is teaching us, okay, that walking in his ways, this includes all matters of uprightness and correcting of character traits. This is what our sages of blessed memory explained. Just as he is merciful, be also merciful. The general principle of all this is for one to conduct all his traits in all the variety of his deeds according to what just and ethical. Okay, and if we take that and we expand it on the seal of God is truth, so to follow the footsteps of God, to be as God in amongst people, is not only to be merciful and to have to conduct our ways and trades according to just and ethics. Part of it is not to steal, not to cheat, not to lie, not only to amongst ourselves, but also to other people, to Gentiles, because that would be a Kiddush Hashem. The other way will be a Chilul Hashem. And this is how we should behave in the world.